Hi everyone, my name is Roberta of Global Patriots United. Global Patriots United is a non-profit organization with a mission to promote a better world through interviews and music. Our music and interviews address pressing global issues to raise awareness and encourage individuals, organizations, and government to take action for a more equitable, harmonious, and a sustainable world. Under the umbrella of our Better World campaign, the theme for the month of January is well-being. This campaign focuses on the multidimensional facets of well-being and their impact in determining the quality of life of people around the world. Today, I once again have a very insightful person who spoke profoundly about love in our previous interview. He's here today to equally talk about the importance of education and its impact on our general well-being. He is in the person of Dr. Mohammed Marzuq. Welcome, Dr. Marzuq.
Thank you.
It's always an honor to have you here with us.
And I am always humbled to be with you.
Great.
Yes.
So, for us, we do know a lot about you. So, for those who may be seeing you for the first time, can you introduce yourself?
I'm your humble servant, Dr. Mohammed Marzuq, personal assistant to His Eminence the National Chief Imam Sheikh Dr. Uthman Nuhi Sharwutu, a former member of Get Fund Board, a former member of Guyana Library Authority Board, a fervent lover of education, and a human rights activist.
Yes, right. One of the important global issues that we face is access to education for all. And there is a staggering number of people, especially adults, of 754 million adults who happen to still be illiterate, and then 250 million children who lack basic literacy skills. Now, before we go into that data, help us understand the importance of education at the first place.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. It is important for all of us to understand that the education is very important to the survival of humanity. But before we even discuss the importance of education, we need to know what education is. And we need to understand that education is the development of knowledge, skills, values, attitudes that are central to the well-being of all human beings. And in that case, education constitutes the foundation of human prosperity. You need to know, and when we talk about education, let us not limit it to a matter of the classroom, not at all. Literacy can be a synonym of education, but it cannot be the same meaning of education. Literacy is only a subset of education. Education goes beyond literacy. And when I say literacy, I'm referring to the ability to read and write. But beyond reading and writing, education is also about critical thinking. It is also about building the ability for innovation, ability for creativity, ability to solve problems. And that is why educational psychologists have been able to identify 3 domains of education. We have the affective, we have the cognitive, and then we have the psychomotor. The cognitive is about the mind, the training of the mind. Affective is about the training of the heart. You know, there is a link between the mind and the heart. Anytime at all you want to do something, it becomes a matter of convergence between the mind and the heart. The mind may think, the heart may love. If the mind thinks and the heart doesn't like, definitely you may abandon it. And then beyond that, you have the psychomotor. Sometimes when the mind thinks and the heart laughs, definitely you will need the tool to actualize what has been thought. And therefore you will have the psychomotor. The psychomotor is about the body, not the mind, not the heart, but the body, the hand specifically. And that is why when we talk about the 3 domains, in fact, the 3 domains of education are also responsible for classification of education into areas: humanities, social sciences, law, and other professional courses. These are about either the heart or the mind. And when we talk of psychomotor, you have technology education, you have vocational education, you have technical education, you have any other kind of education in which the hand is largely involved. So we are talking about the practical nature of education. So in that case, education should be taken into consideration as a holistic commodity. And in that case, it should be able to position a human being on a strategic place where the human being is supposed to be very productive to society. So that tells you that the impact of education is great, because without education, the human society will be another version of the jungle, because it is education that distinguishes light from darkness. And once you have the light, definitely you do everything possible to ensure the prosperity of humanity. But if you remain in darkness, you cannot. And because of the power of education, that it is accepted in every culture. And this reminds me of an Arabic adage. And I quote and unquote, وراء كل أمة عظيمة تربية عظيمة. Behind every great community is a great education. In fact, contemporary society is enough to prove the veracity of this adage. We are now in a time when every great nation is also having the greatest, I'm not using the greatest form of education. There's no nation in contemporary society that prize in its greatness without an appreciable level of pride in education.
Yeah.
So education is very impactful, and it is the education that will allow us to appreciate the well-being of humanity. When we talk of the well-being of humanity too, I think there's the need for us to be highly broad. I mean, to be broad in terms of well-being, because mostly you talk of well-being and people will be referring to economic well-being or the material well-being. I think here I will add that we also need the cultural well-being, the social well-being, and even moral well-being, because it takes morality to regulate knowledge. You know, when you are well educated and then you lack morality, your education could be counterproductive. Let me give you a classic example. It takes knowledge out of education to produce a gun. It takes the same knowledge out of education to use the gun. It is only morality that will distinguish the usage of the gun positively and the usage of the gun negatively. For example, the police officer will use the same gun produced from education, from knowledge, to protect human being. That is a responsible trained officer who is not corrupt. And then the armed robber uses the same gun for armed robbery. When you take the computer, for instance, definitely you are a media personality and you largely use computer to do your work. So while you use the same computer for TV production or for media practice, another person is using the same computer for cyber fraud. So the difference here is morality. You are regulated by morality, and that is why you are using it positively. Somebody is not regulated by morality, and that is why he or she is using it negatively. So when we talk of well-being, I think morality should also be considered. So moral well-being, economic well-being, social well-being, cultural well-being. And we have added culture because at a level, culture becomes a tool of education. And anthropologists and psychologists are of the argument that culture is a means of development. And without culture, without identity, no community can develop.
When we talk about well-being, many of us, our minds go to physical, psychological well-being. But the aspect of socio-economic well-being, we hardly talk about that. So in your view, how does education directly impact general well-being?
Well, education impacts our general well-being, particularly the ignored areas, those areas that you have mentioned, the social well-being and the economic well-being. Because education will equip you with the skills and values to be able to acquire a kind of potency, a kind of competency in looking for economic opportunities. And then you also will be able to get a lot of understanding on the culture, a lot of understanding on the even emotional well-being. And once you are well educated, definitely it exposes you to a lot of opportunities. And again, education also it puts you in a situation where you are refined.
Yeah.
And when you are refined, definitely you will not do anything to threaten your community. You will not do anything to threaten your own growth. So that also will have a positive impact on you. Education should also make you a holistic scholar that will a holistic scholar that will appreciate life and then appreciate the dynamics of various cultures and understand that each culture is important. And then you, in that case, you'll be able to understand that culture itself can become a tool for you to enhance the well-being of humanity. So in that case, education is highly impactful. And when we talk about well-being, if no matter how you define it, I know it is abstract, but no matter how you define it, it is impossible without effective education.
It's interesting you mentioned about culture. I think there's a concept now that talks about cultural globalization,
Sure.
where there is a transfer of different beliefs, value system from different people,
Sure.
in order to intensify social relations among them.
Yes.
And it's a good point you made in strengthening and accepting people's values,
Yes.
and in finding ways of working together
Sure.
for shared opportunities,
Sure.
basically.
Sure.
It's interesting that building a good quality educational system requires a strong economy.
Yes.
And a strong economy in return also equally requires quality education.
Yeah.
So for countries that are economically vulnerable, how do they attempt to provide quality education for their people?
Yes, and that's a very big challenge because if you are economically vulnerable, it reflects in every aspect of your life,
Yeah.
including education. So it's very difficult. But countries that are economically vulnerable, but that are ruled by forward-thinking people, will always find a way of getting money or getting resources to fund education. And that becomes a matter of priority. When you prioritize education, it doesn't matter the status of your economic success. You will definitely find a way of getting the best education. Do you know that Zimbabwe under Mugabe in fact, it was highly economically vulnerable because of the sanctions. And even at that time, Zimbabwe was the place where you could get the best education, yes, at least in Southern Africa. So the Zimbabweans are well educated. At the time, we're talking about between 90 and 80% literacy in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Well educated, even in a damaged economy. So it was a matter of priority.
Yeah.
Yes, they prioritized education and they ignored other areas and invested heavily in education. So the same way here, it takes a huge sum of money to train a medical doctor at Harvard or Oxford. And that medical doctor may come here and may find troubles. Troubles in the sense that it may be very difficult for him to be conversant with tropical diseases that are confronting us here. It takes less to train the same medical doctor at the University of Ghana Medical School. It may even take less than that of University of Ghana Medical School for a person to be trained at the University for Development Medical School. So at the end of the day, it becomes the responsibility of all the graduates to leverage what has been given to them in terms of training to work productively. So yes, economic viability is tied to effective education, but the only solution in this area is prioritization. And when you prioritize, you look for alternative sources of funding. Even if you can look for funding from external sources,
Yeah.
still it will be relevant and you can find the solution. So here, it is up to the authorities to prioritize education, no matter how damaged our economies are. If they are interested in quality education, they should be able to look for funding, they should be able to look for resources, they should be able to provide the best infrastructure, the facilities, the best training, the relevant curricula, so that at the end of the day, we can enjoy effective education in spite of our economic challenges. And effective education also depends on effective and relevant curriculum. But let us not be deceived into thinking that relevant curriculum designed on paper is enough. It is not enough. The curriculum, no matter how effective it is on paper, needs to be practicalized.
Yeah.
And if you cannot put it into a practical reality, definitely it becomes as irrelevant as irrelevant as non-existent. Is it? So for instance, I have been told that the current SHS curriculum is highly effective on paper. And if it is well implemented, then of course the results will be very effective and very impactful. However, it takes the will, the political will of the government to implement it. And it also takes a sense of prioritization to implement it. It is not implemented in vacuum. It needs a kind of policy decisions and financial capacity to implement. And I strongly believe that if the government is able to implement it as beautiful as it is on paper, then of course we will be thinking of effective education for our children in this generation and in the generations yet to come.
I was just about to ask you about what your suggestion would be in addressing some of these challenges, both globally and locally. But I think you mentioned some of them. Is there any other thoughts in terms of the solutions that you think you may want to add on?
Yes, I think if it is, in terms of solutions, I will call for a global fund for education. And this fund should be put under UNESCO. After all, UNESCO is the organ of education under the United Nations. And UNESCO supervises quality of education, quality of accessibility, effectiveness of education, and everything in relation to education. So let there be a global fund for global education. This fund should be meant to identify vulnerable universities, colleges, and schools. And these schools in the various countries should have access to this fund. Wealthy nations should be able to contribute to the fund. This is not to call for dependency mentality in educational delivery. This is rather to call for equity in the enjoyment of educational resources for global citizens. Definitely, sovereignty is now on paper. Sovereignty has given way to globalization. And what is happening here should be of interest to anybody. For instance, we are not Americans, but Americans should be interested in what is happening here, because the effect of whatever is happening here could be felt even in America. The wealthy nations should be interested in the educational systems of the weaker nations, because at the end of the day, we are building a huge global community. You mentioned the cultural integrations, so we are building a huge global community. So such a fund should be able to solve the imbalances, the structural weaknesses, the economic imbalances between the wealthy nations and the weaker nations. And if we are able to utilize such a fund effectively, then we'll be able to acquire a high level of effectiveness in the delivery of education. Let the fund also be operated in such a way that it will lead to self-reliance, not dependency mentality. If, for instance, the fund is created for a very long time to help the weaker nations. Those weaker nations should be well equipped enough to become strong and stand by themselves, and that will lead to the sense of self-reliance rather than dependency mentality. Because anywhere there is dependency mentality, the problem is not solved. In fact, if you are giving charity to somebody, make sure that that charity will equip and empower him or her to become self-reliant. Because if you continue to give him or her the handouts without putting in measures to make him or her self-reliant, the burden will still be on you and the problem is not solved. So yes, Global Fund to help weaker nations, but the ultimate objective of the fund should be to make the weaker nations self-reliant in terms of educational delivery for the supreme interest of their citizenry.
I think it's very important you mentioned that. It's also important to note that I think World Bank is making strides in even giving funding for
Yes.
vulnerable nations to support education. However, to add on to what you said earlier, I think it's also about providing root cause solutions
Yes.
to education that we actually experience that our success rate for eradicating poverty and other related issues
Yes.
connected with education would really solve the problem that many nations face. What will be your final words or your parting words to the global community?
Well, we are talking about the global community. So my final word is in relation to efforts by the global community to unify humanity in the area of education. Let us all accept that education is the genesis of our success. Let us use education as a tool of unifying humanity in spite of our cultural, religious, ethnic, and racial differences. One of the most important things that the global community should also accept is the ability to bridge the gap between the industry and academia in terms of educational delivery. Anytime at all education does not ensure employability, then that education is next to ignorance. And in fact, we should avoid a situation where education becomes a tribute to unemployment. If it is a tribute to unemployment, it is as dangerous as ignorance. Finally, let us also understand that there is a thin line between education and indoctrination. And when indoctrination masquerades as education, the result becomes catastrophic. Let us accept the responsibility to clearly identify areas of pursuit in the supreme interest of humanity as education and areas to avoid as indoctrination. And when we all agree that education is a collective responsibility and play our individual roles successfully, in the end, we will not remember the discomfort of our individual struggle, but the comfort of our collective success. Thank you for the opportunity once again.